Hello, everyone. My name is Professor Mira Pantic. Welcome to the Global Newsroom. Today, we're going to talk about media in India. Let me share my screen with you and start a slideshow. So this semester, we're basically discussing the media in the global north and global south, and then we're going to cover specific countries. I will deliver you some lectures related to the countries that I selected, and then you will also deliver your own presentations on countries that we haven't covered in this class, and you will do that in the end of the semester. Now, let's take a look at India and what we know about this country. So the capital of India is New Delhi. The population of this country is 1.37 billion, and people in India speak multiple languages. They include Hindi, English, and many local languages. Life expectancy in India is 68 years for men and 71 years for women. If you want to learn more about the country profile, I would suggest you to go to the BBC website. You will find a reference listed at the end of this PowerPoint presentation. What do we know about the population of India, and why is this country so intriguing to us? The official name of the country is the Republic of India. This country is the world's largest democracy. I listed some of the languages that people speak, but Hindi and English are just among 15 major languages. Hindi is the most common language spoken in India. Currently, the largest country in the world in terms of its population is China, but India is expected to be the world's most populous nation by 2028, sorry. So it will actually China will take place number 2, while India will be the most populous nation. Aside from this many languages, India is also a country with multiple major religions. So there are 8 major religions, and those include Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, and others. India is also a relevant regional power, but it has a lot of social and economic problems. Let's take a brief look at the media history of the country. Newspapers in India emerged in the late 18th century. As you know, India was under the British rule, and the press played an important role in India's struggle for independence from British rule that lasted from 1858 until 1947. Mahatma Gandhi was the most prominent Indian leader, and Gandhi, along with Nehru, established newspapers in the early 20th century, and these newspapers played an important role in fight for independence. Now, looking into media liberalization in India, it started in the 1990s. Before media liberalization, the broadcast media in India were government-owned. So now let's think for a second, what does it mean? We looked at media freedoms across the globe, and we understand that when media is government-owned, then the government has an influence on the news, the way the news is being framed, and what information will reach a wider population and what information will be hidden from them. So to have a free press in the country, it is really important that the media are not in the hands of the government. So that is why the liberalization of India's economy that started in the 1990s was so relevant. India also represents a major Asian technology hub with its computer science and scientists and engineers. Newspapers in India are thriving. So, as you know, a lot of the world is dealing with decline in press. They're dealing, why? Because people are switching to digital media platforms. They obtain news from news websites, blogs, independent websites, government websites, social media, and many other platforms. So people are less likely across the globe to read newspapers especially because they can obtain so much information for free online. But in India, we have a slightly different situation. India's newspapers are thriving. What is the reason for this success? First of all, with increased literacy rates, more people started reading newspapers. And then their higher income levels, so more money to spend on newspapers. And finally, newspapers are inexpensive. I have a close friend from India, and he shared with me a story how in India many people would just share one newspaper, which is common. I believe in other countries as well. So you read a newspaper and then you share it with your friends or family members. So multiple people are able to read one newspaper. So it's also common for people to, read a newspaper in the street and give it to somebody else, or share a newspaper, or read a newspaper in a coffee shop. Let's take a look at broadcast and digital media in India. They're also growing. So both broadcast and digital media are growing. Actually, speaking of newspapers in India, you can find so many of them that have their digital editions, and there are a lot of newspapers in India that are in English. So you can actually read news from India online in English. According to the BBC, there are currently around 197 million TV households. Many of them use satellite or cable television. In post-independence India, so we're talking about the period after 1947, radio was considered as the medium to carry developmental messages. Why was this important? Because this way radio was reaching rural audiences with educational program, and it did not require literacy. So people in these rural areas were able to receive messages, and they didn't need to be literate necessarily, because they were receiving important developmental messages through the radio. In digital terms, India places second in terms of the number of internet users, right after China. As I mentioned, China is currently the most populous country in the world, but India is supposed to take that place, is predicted to take that place in 2028. So it is not surprising that China is currently the first country in the world when it comes to the number of internet users, but India is right after it. Let's take a look at the number of social network users in India from 2015 to 2020, with estimates until 2040, and this is an estimate in million. So let's take a look at this graph. What is the number? You see that in 2015, this was 142.23, but it keeps growing, and you see it keeps growing and growing and growing, and in 2040, it is expected that India will have as many as 1.50, almost 53 billion users. So just look at the number. 2015, it was 142 million, and then in 25 years, it will be 1.5 53 billion or social network users. So this is because of their growing literacy rate. This is because of their growing exposure to digital technologies, and also people in India, they do read newspapers, they obtain their news through radio and television, but they also turn to digital platforms to obtain news. Let's take a look at media and entertainment in India. Magazines are popular, and there is a vast variety of magazines that are printed in various languages. Again, Hindi is the most widely spoken language in India, as well as English. So magazines are being printed in diverse languages. Cable television began to have a significant presence in the 1990s in India. Why in the 1990s? Because that is where the liberalization of India's economy started. According to the BBC website, there are about 900 private satellite TV stations in India, as many as 900. And programming and stories are delivered in various languages. Game shows in India are very popular, and also they have their own film industry, which is called Bollywood, or India's Hollywood. So India has its own Hollywood. What are some of the issues when it comes to India, media in India, and media freedoms? Since liberalization in 1990s, there has been a shift in focus from developmental TV programs to programs for the growing urban middle class. Why is this developmental TV program important? It is important for to educate people who live in rural areas. But what happened in the 1990s is that the program is predominantly being created for the growing urban middle class. After decades of government programming that had little relevance to the urban viewers, television is, for this reason, accused of an elitist bias. Basically, why are you focused on creating a program for this urban middle class? Why aren't you also creating more programs for less developed rural areas? There are also press freedom challenges illustrated in internet censorship and violence against journalists. Let's take a look at the World Press Freedom Index. So you see a lot of Asian countries deal with the lack of media freedoms, and among them is India. So its rating dropped by 11 spots in a year. As you can see, in 2022, India occupied place number 150 out of 180 countries that are included in the World Press Freedom Index. And now in 2023, it was placed 161st place. So definitely, this is one of the countries that struggles when it comes to media freedoms. Journalists are exposed to threats, so they're exposed to verbal attacks, and these are just some of the reasons why India is placed this low on the World Press Freedom Index, along with many other Asian countries. And you can see it on the list. At the bottom of the list are China and North Korea. As we discuss World Press Freedom Index, let's take a look at some of the challenges that journalists face in India. India is one of the world's most dangerous countries for journalists, according to Reporters Without Borders. I already show you that in 2021 and also in 2023, its ranking was 161. On average, 3 to 4 journalists are killed each year in connection to their work. And Reporters Without Borders stated that the violence against journalists, the politically partisan media, and the concentration of media ownership all demonstrate that press freedom is in crisis in India. So regardless of flourishing of newspapers and digital websites and people's exposure to television and radio, there's still a lot of problems in this country, and a lot of them are related to the violence against journalists that unfortunately in some cases resulted in the death of journalists. Now, let's overview this lecture, and we will talk about India in more detail in class. But to overview this lecture, what are some of the most important things that we learned? Indian media market is quite vibrant. There is an increase in literacy rates, which made the print flourish. So this is definitely a positive development, because it is important for a democracy like Indian. It is important to keep educating people. It is important that these literacy rates are growing and they're exposed to a vast array of information. Liberalization of the Indian media market started in 1990s. So basically, India became open to foreign competition in 1990s, and BBC started operating there, and other news organizations. And the only problem that we see that the liberalization of media brought is that the programming has started focusing more on the growing middle class, and it became a bit elitistic, and it focused less on the developmental program, which is important for educating audiences. Cable channels, FM radio stations, and newspapers with programming and stories are being delivered in various languages. Also, we can read news from India and learn about the events in that country online, because there's so much information delivered through English written newspapers or English spoken programming. There is an increase in digital media users, but the country remains grounded in traditional newspapers, and this is also to a great extent because of the digital divide, as not the entire population in India has the same access to the internet and to digital media. And again, this is one of the countries that is very dangerous for journalists. They face verbal attacks, physical attacks, and in some cases, unfortunately, we had seen murders of journalists, because that is related to the work that they performed. So there's one thing that I didn't cover in this lecture, and that happened for a reason. I actually wanted you to do your research, and then we will talk about it in class. What your exercise is, you need to find 3 prominent media organizations in India. I would suggest that one of them is a television, another one is a radio, and then a print newspaper. But you can, when it comes to print newspapers, I know that you cannot physically obtain them. So just look for newspapers that are also available in the digital format that we can read online, that have their own website, so we can access them that way. And just write about them. So describe these outlets briefly and explain what kind of content you have found on their sites. So how do you describe them? Briefly, just simply Google Media in India, go to their websites, go to About section, read what that news organization is about, what kind of content they deliver, and then simply look at the website, look at the website of that media organization, look what kind of content they deliver. Are they focused on politics? Are they focused on global news? Or how diverse their content is? What is it that you learned about India as you were reading these newspapers? So go and do a thorough analysis, and then write about 300 words and provide links to your sources. So don't just write an essay, but make sure that at the bottom of your essay, you added links, so I can actually go and see the news organization that you presented in your essay. So please make sure to do that. And then post your exercise under media in India in classes. Right? I hope you understood the exercise. And this is my reference list. So if you want to learn more about India, I would suggest you, aside from reading the book chapter that is assigned for today, you can go to Reporters Without Borders website and also go to the BBC website. They always have a great portrayal of each country on their website, and they also update their articles related to the media in each country that they're covering. And then I would also suggest you to go to Statista website to look at the number of social network users in India in more detail, but you also have it inside this PowerPoint presentation. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, please send me an email, or you can just contact me via Twitter or X. Right? So please complete the exercise on time. Thank you very much and have a great day, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.